Starting today, all employees must strictly adhere to the new dress code outlined in Section 14B of the updated HR Manual. Failure to maintain a professional appearance, specifically regarding fabric choices that deviate from traditional standards, may result in disciplinary action. The email arrived at 7:03 a.m. on a rainy Monday morning, before I even finished heating my coffee in the microwave. The subject line read, "Let's look our best, everyone," with several star emojis, Tiffany's trademark. I read it twice, my jaw clenched, sipping my bitter coffee in the corner cubicle near the copier. The one with the flickering fluorescent light that made everything look like a hostage video. Of course, I knew exactly who that message was directed at. No one else in the compliance department wore charcoal gray Brooks Brothers wool pants. Everyone else showed up in ill-fitting khakis or those cheap Amazon pencil skirts that rode up like they had a life of their own. But me? I dressed like someone who cared. Discreetly, professionally. And that made me a target. My name is Lucas, I'm 32 years old, and I just received the most passive-aggressive declaration of war in corporate history. Tiffany Hastings, 31 years old, HR manager, pseudo-feminist tyrant in nude heels, had her sights set on me since the day she discovered our salaries weren't as far apart as she'd imagined. Brenda, her clipboard-wielding lackey, had asked if my mature wardrobe was inspired by old FBI dramas. The laughter from that comment still echoed down the hall sometimes. But I didn't blink. I never blink. That's my strength. No drama, no rolling my eyes. Just brutal, infuriating calm. I spent the morning doing what I always do, real work. Scanning Defense Department contract stipulations, checking security clearance schedules, and verifying every data classification tag before sending it to the internal system. It was invisible, thankless, and absolutely essential work. And I was exceptionally good at it. Most people in that building didn't even know what CUI meant, let alone how to file it. I had recently gone through a vetting process that had lasted months and would have turned a lesser soul inside out. Interviews, background checks, even a surprise home inspection where two grim men in government coats asked about the frequency of my internet router resets. The reward? A thin, almost imperceptible badge embedded with a black-level security chip. The highest clearance issued by the DSS to civilian contractors. I hadn't told anyone. Why would I? That kind of power didn't belong in the mouth of a gossip like Brenda. The badge was tucked away in a reinforced leather wallet in my purse. Quiet, hidden, waiting. At 10:17 in the morning, Tiffany strode down the hall with her usual fanfare, heels clicking, cloud of perfume suffocating the oxygen, and made a dramatic U-turn toward my workspace. "Hi, Lucas," she said, dragging out the words like gum. "Just wanted to confirm you had a chance to review the new dress code policy." I didn't look up. There's nothing in there that applies to me. Brenda materialized 2 seconds later, as if summoned by mean girl witchcraft. "We're just trying to create a unified aesthetic, you know," she chirped. "And some of the older styles can send mixed messages." I finally looked up. Mixed messages to whom? The Pentagon. Brenda's smile faltered. Tiffany smiled maliciously. "Just making sure we're all on the same page. After all, some people don't always realize when they're towing the line." "I don't tow lines," I replied coldly. "I write them. Section 16A of the Federal Compliance Summary trumps any HR memo. But I'm sure you already knew that." Tiffany's cheeks tightened. She didn't respond, just gave that fake smile that never reached her eyes, turned, and walked away in a cloud of citrus hostility. Brenda followed her, whispering something that made them both cackle as if they had just humiliated the prom queen. I returned to my screen, but something in my chest had changed. The cold, familiar contraction of corporate sabotage. I'd felt it before. The email, the threat disguised in emotionalized bureaucracy, seemed different. It was clumsy, emotional, reckless. Which meant Tiffany was getting bold. And boldness in small minds is dangerous. I glanced down at my bag. The badge rested nestled between a bag of almonds and a portable charger, vibrating with silent authority. A digital fingerprint of trust from the most paranoid government on Earth. I didn't earn it by being nice. I earned it by knowing how to remain invisible until visibility became a weapon. And now it seemed like someone was itching to make me visible. If you're enjoying this story of how corporate arrogance can come back to bite you, Be sure to subscribe to the channel to find out how a simple wardrobe war would turn into a lesson in humility that no one would ever forget. But first, let me tell you how Tiffany decided to escalate this idiotic battle even further. Because what she did next wasn't just stupid, it was the first step in her own destruction. The sound of the coffee machine spitting out its last drops of burnt Colombian coffee almost drowned out the smell of something even more nauseating: vanilla body spray and self-importance. Lucas. I had just picked up a plastic stirrer when I felt the room temperature drop 6 degrees. I didn't need to turn around. I knew that breathy exhale. "Wow, Tiffany," she cooed loudly enough for Brenda to hear from 3 cubicles away. "Those pants are interesting." I blinked once, slowly. The pants were a tailored pair of slate gray with a herringbone pattern so subtle it could have been woven by ghosts. But in Tiffany's court, fabric patterns were apparently criminal offenses. Tiffany circled around me like a lioness who had overdone it on the LinkedIn affirmations. "Just wasn't sure if you got last week's update on textile compliance. Section 14B. You read the manual, right?" I took a slow sip of my coffee. I edited the manual for grammar. 3 errors, by the way. Tiffany laughed shrilly and put her hand on her hip. "We just want to be consistent across the department. Those pants are chic, kind of Downton Abbey style, but they don't align well with the traditional weaving requirement." Behind her, Brenda had materialized like a wart. "It's about cohesion," she squeaked, as if they were part of some high-fashion cult. "Team synergy starts with fabric integrity." I turned to them, coffee in hand, spine perfectly straight. "Is this a formal HR complaint?" Tiffany blinked. No, just a conversation. Between equals, woman to man." "Great," I said. "Because this man's contract does not include conversations based on personal taste disguised as politics." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Mark, my direct supervisor, hovering awkwardly in the hallway. He watched the scene, made eye contact with me, then quickly turned and disappeared down the nearest staircase like the coward he was. Not a wave, not a shrug, just a cowardly act of disappearance. Tiffany took a step closer, her voice low but still sugary. "We're just trying to make sure we're seen as reliable professionals. Especially with sensitive work coming up. High-level contracts and all. We wouldn't want to give the wrong impression." Ah, so she knew something was brewing. Even if she didn't know what. The black badge hadn't gone unnoticed. Maybe she'd caught a glimpse. Maybe Brenda had snooped. Either way, the dress code wasn't about pants anymore. It was about control. About sending a message. "Wrong impression," I said, leveling my gaze. "For whom? The Department of Defense? I think they're more concerned with classified files than pinstripes." Tiffany stiffened, her smile cracking slightly. "We just have standards." "You have obsessions," I said calmly. "I have clearance." That hit her like a punch. Tiffany opened her mouth to respond, but couldn't find anything clever to say. She gave a tight, performative shrug and walked away, not before glancing at my pants as if they had personally insulted her degree from whatever HR boot camp she had foamed at the mouth for. The hallway buzzed again. No one said a word, but I could feel eyes burning through the frosted glass pretending not to look. Corporate theater. Everyone always claimed to hate drama until it came with front row seats and bad coffee. I returned to my desk in silence, each click of my heel digging a deeper line between restraint and rage. I didn't pound the keyboard, I didn't send a flaming email. I just stared at my screen for a moment longer than usual. Then I opened my locked drawer and took out a notebook. I flipped through the pages of policy notes and compliance diagrams until I found the one labeled crossed lines. I added a date at the bottom. Just 2 words, textile war. But Tiffany was just getting started. On Thursday, she showed up with a new professional appearance standards handbook, 23 pages of nonsense that didn't exist on Monday. Pages she had clearly printed on her home printer, judging by the amateurish Times New Roman font and inconsistent margins. "Lucas," she said, dropping it on my desk with a dramatic thud. "I thought you'd like to review this before tomorrow's team meeting." I flipped through it briefly. It was a masterpiece of microaggression disguised as policy. Entire sections devoted to age-appropriate clothing choices and avoiding distracting fashion statements. A whole page on how complex fabric patterns can convey a lack of professional judgment. "Interesting," I said, closing it. especially considering that our company doesn't have a legal department that reviewed this, no corporate approval, and no basis in the actual federal regulations that govern our operation. Tiffany's face faltered. It's just an update to existing guidelines. Guidelines, I repeated. That supersede federal compliance requirements? Well, not exactly, but... Then it's a suggestion. It's an expectation. Based on what? Team leadership. I looked at her for a long moment. Tiffany, have you ever read an actual federal contract? Have you ever been on a Department of Defense facility? That's not. Have you ever processed classified documentation? Her face was turning blotchy. The point, I said, standing up, is that you're trying to create policies for a job you don't understand, in a field you have no experience in, to solve a problem that exists only in your head. I left the manual on her desk on my way to the bathroom. When I returned, it was gone. On Friday, she escalated. An email arrived at 2:14 p.m. Subject: HR issue, immediate attention required. No body text, no greeting. Just a calendar attachment with a 15-minute window and a location, room 3C. I stared at it for a few seconds before standing up, slow and silent like someone rising from their own funeral. The click of my badge locking my terminal echoed louder than it should have. My desk, with its organized folders and color-coded post-its, seemed alien now. Like it belonged to someone else. Like a crime scene. I walked down the hall with all the ceremony of a condemned man on his final walk. Past the interns pretending to be busy, past Mark's office door, closed, blinds down, cowardly. Room 3C was already occupied when I arrived. Tiffany was sitting at the head of the small conference table, her iPad angled just right, as if she were hosting a TED Talk on weaponized condescension. Brenda was sitting to her right, fidgeting with a pink gel pen like a nervous squirrel. To her left was Mr. Morton, Senior Operations Manager, a man who once congratulated me on a 72-page audit report by saying, "That's a lot of words for compliance material." He now looked deeply uncomfortable, as if he had been promised a simple witness role and not the chance to star in an execution. "Lucas," Tiffany said, her tone dipped in false warmth. "Thank you for joining us." "I was ordered to come," I replied, sitting down with the quiet grace of someone about to lose everything and still refusing to give them the pleasure. "Let's get right to it," Brenda chirped, unfolding a typed script. "This is a formal termination meeting conducted in accordance with corporate procedure outlined in Section 8B of the Employee Responsibility Guidelines." I blinked. Tiffany continued, eyes shining. "Due to repeated failure to comply with our updated dress code policy and a demonstrated pattern of insubordination when approached, the company has no choice but to terminate your employment effective immediately." Brenda handed me a 2-page document with the words "Final Warning" printed in bold red letters at the top. It looked like a parking ticket. "You have been warned several times," Tiffany continued. "This morning's confrontation was simply the last straw." I scanned the document. My name, my employee ID, the word challenge appeared 3 times. There was no mention of my clearance level, no mention of my work output, which was impeccable. Just phrases like workplace cohesion and setting a cultural tone. I felt nothing at first. No tears, no anger. Just a cold vacuum in my chest sucking the last bit of belief I had clung to that professionalism still meant anything. But deep down, something was brewing. Something that Tiffany, in her brilliant arrogance, had just unwittingly awakened. And in 12 hours, the entire building would know exactly what they had done. "I understand," I said, rising with deliberate calm. "I wouldn't want to cause a security breach." Tiffany laughed. "Don't be dramatic, Lucas." I didn't respond. I just turned toward the door, but before I left, I paused and looked back over my shoulder. "You just fired the only person in this building who knew how to keep your government contract from collapsing like a cheap plastic chair." 3 faces blinked at me, empty, uncomprehending. I smiled. "Enjoy your textile integrity." The walk back to my desk seemed longer than it had ever been. Somehow stretched out, as if the office itself was savoring my humiliation. The box they gave me was insultingly small, the kind designed for compassion, not logistics. A single sheet of bubble wrap fluttered uselessly at the bottom like a consolation prize. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. but I could feel that slow boiling flush of public shame rising up my spine. Not the loud kind. The silent kind. The kind that settles into your bones and echoes with every "Are you okay?" offered by people who never cared before today. I passed through the marketing department first. No one said anything. Rachel looked up, blinked, then quickly lowered her head back to her screen. Jason gave a half wave, as if we had bumped into each other in the frozen aisle at Trader Joe's, not 5 feet from the open wound of my career. Next was accounts receivable. One of the interns muttered, "I'm sorry," with the kind of panicked eyes normally reserved for funerals. I gave a dead, polite smile. I kept walking. When I got to my cubicle, Mark was standing there, useless as ever, hands in his pockets like a guilty teenager. "Hey, he said, clearing his throat. "Sorry to see you go, Lucas." I tilted my head. "You're sorry." He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. After a pause, he nodded. "Well, good luck out there, then." He walked away. I watched his back as he receded down the hallway, disappearing into the warm safety of managerial cowardice. It was perfect, really. An appropriate parting gesture from a man who once spent 10 full minutes in a meeting explaining the importance of being a team player, while I silently corrected a federal compliance error that would have cost them 6 figures. The desk itself was still mine, at least for the next 10 minutes. I began packing up with quiet efficiency. The framed photo of me and my sister at Arches National Park. My personalized mug that said, "Trust, but verify." Cool notepad scribbled with notes about acquisition protocols. A small cactus that I had nursed back to life after Brenda overwatered it last year. Possibly on purpose. Everything went into the box except for the badge. It was under my keyboard, right where I always kept it, hidden from view. Its black surface was unmarked except for the government-issued RFID number engraved near the bottom. I picked it up gently, as if it were a match with the power to burn the entire place down. I took the protective sleeve out of my bag, a thick black envelope lined with radio frequency blocking mesh. It was labeled DSS Property, Do Not Dispose. I slid the badge out with the care of someone locking away a loaded gun. I closed the bag and slung it over my shoulder. I looked around one last time. Not at the people, but at the paper, the files, the half-finished data records still flashing on my screen. Each one a tiny thread holding together a $50 million contract. Threads I had been sewing together alone for months. Now frayed. Now careless. I walked to the elevator. No one followed me. At the reception desk, a thin man in a faded sweatshirt who couldn't look me in the eye was waiting for me. He handed me a sealed envelope. "Last paycheck and Cobra information," he muttered. "Lovely," I said, dropping it into the trash can. The elevator doors opened. I stepped in, turned around, and as they closed, I watched the lobby shrink. The glass walls, the fake smiles, the fake plants, everything fake. I didn't cry. But deep down in my stomach, a new feeling was forming. Not sadness, not even anger. Determination. Cold, clean, metallic. Something had just been set in motion. And no one in that building was allowed to see what was coming. I had just started to peel the sticker off my now useless employee badge when the glass doors behind me opened with a gust of wind and purpose. Not the kind of distracted entrance you get with sales reps or interviewees fiddling with portfolios. No, this was military precision. Energy. I looked up from my chair in the lobby just in time to see a man and a woman in matching dark suits pass by, as if summoned by seismic instability. No logos on their briefcases. No name tags. But their posture said it all. These people weren't here for team building. The man was tall, with closely cropped hair and a tie so symmetrical it looked stamped. The woman wore her hair in a severe bun and walked half a step ahead of him, scanning the room as if evaluating it. Both wore thin lapel pins. Black, circular, with the unmistakable eagle insignia encased in a silver ring. My breath stopped. DSS. Not technological non-compliance, DSS. Not the funny acronym DSS. No, this was the real thing. Defense Security Service. The guys who don't knock unless protocols have been torn up, burned, and left smoldering in the corner of your cubicle next to the vending machine. The woman approached the reception desk without even glancing at the directory board. "We need to speak with Walter Phelps, head of security, and Brian Denning, his CEO, immediately." Her tone was sharp but controlled. The kind of voice that skipped please, and still wasn't rude. Just dangerous. The receptionist stammered. They're both in meetings right now, can I? The man leaned forward. This isn't a request. The receptionist froze, picked up the phone. She dialed with the speed of someone who didn't want to be held responsible for what happened next. I sat motionless, the envelope with my last paycheck crumpled in my lap. 1,000 things raced through my mind at once. Payroll dates, severance math, the forgotten yogurt still in my desk drawer. But they all burned away in the face of one burning realization. The system check-in. The badge deactivation. The overdue protocol. They had noticed. The government had noticed. Which meant that someone had finally opened the wrong file without authorization. Or maybe they tried to access the shared drive I had partitioned on DSS's instructions. Maybe Tiffany, in her infinite genius, had signed the shutdown checklist without performing a security wipe. Whatever the trigger, it didn't matter now. It was happening. My fingers trembled slightly as I adjusted the strap of my bag. I kept my head down, pretending disinterest, but my ears were locked. The receptionist hung up. They'll be down in just a minute. The woman nodded. The man's eyes scanned the room. They landed briefly on me, lingered for half a second, then moved on. He didn't recognize me. Not yet. I exhaled carefully. In my chest, something old and buried cracked open. A rush of adrenaline melted with grim satisfaction. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't petty. I hadn't just lost my job over a pair of pants. I had been fired in violation of a federal security contract. And now the adults had arrived. The lobby grew quieter, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. 2 girls from marketing emerged from the elevator laughing about some topic on Slack, then fell silent when they spotted the suits. One of them muttered something and pivoted back inside. I sat still, composed, but deep down my world had tilted. Not backward. Forward. In the gravity of that slow-motion shift, the humiliation of the last hour was burning like fog under a blowtorch. They didn't know what they'd done. But they were about to find out. The elevator dinged once more, fast, executive override. I didn't need to look to know who was coming out. I could already hear it, the tight click of heels trying not to sound too frantic. Tiffany, flanked by Brenda, whose clipboard was absent for the first time in the documented history of the office. Tiffany's steps were stiff, mechanical. Her usual posture, chin high, jaw set like a pageant queen at war, was gone. Her face was pale. Not tired, not stressed. Pale as blood drained, horror sucked out, what the hell have I done? Kind of pale. They didn't recognize me as they passed. They couldn't. Tiffany's eyes flicked in my direction for half a second, landed, and immediately recoiled as if they had touched a bare wire. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just sipped the lukewarm coffee I'd been sipping since my own walk of shame, now watching as the shame ricocheted back at the speed of light. The conference room door clicked open. Miss Hastings. Agent Rossi's voice, cold and unhurried. Tiffany turned so fast that her badge lanyard whipped to the side. Why, yes. Inside. Now. Tiffany obeyed. Brenda wasn't invited. She wilted back into the hallway like a ghost denied entry to the underworld. Tiffany collapsed into the nearest chair, blinking as if she had just been pulled from a dream. I saw her lips form the word how, but no one answered. The door hissed open and Agent Miller stepped out. A few steps behind him, Brian came into view. Withered, sweating, eyes hollow. He looked at me as if I held the detonator. Because, in a way, I did. And I hadn't even pressed the button. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Tiffany followed him a second later, mascara running down her face like prison bars. She wouldn't look directly at me. She couldn't. I didn't celebrate. I didn't smile. I just stared. This wasn't satisfaction. It wasn't revenge. It was something cleaner. Colder. Like watching a ship sink that should never have been built. The building behind me was still standing, but the world inside it had collapsed. Agent Miller emerged from the conference room with the expression of someone who had just delivered a final verdict. Brian followed him, staggering as if he had been hit by a truck. Mr. Givens, Miller said, adjusting his tie. The situation has been clarified. Through the glass, I could see Tiffany still sitting, staring at the table as if trying to understand a foreign language. Brenda had disappeared completely, probably dissolved into her own insignificance. The $50 million contract, Miller continued, has been formally revoked at 1542. The company is under investigation for federal safety negligence. Ms. Hastings' credentials have been permanently revoked. Brian approached, his face a mask of sweaty despair. "Lucas, please," he begged. "There has to be something, some way to reverse this. You know the protocols better than anyone." I looked at him with the calmness of someone watching a fire that hadn't started. "I did," I corrected. "Before I was fired for imaginary dress code violations." His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "But you could, with your authorization, maybe explain to them that it was a misunderstanding?" "Misunderstanding," I repeated, almost smiling. "You documented my dismissal. You signed the papers. You made it official, Brian. The bureaucracy you all love so much is now strangling you." Agent Rossi approached with a thick envelope. "Mr. Givens, we have authorization to formalize an offer. Supervisory compliance position directly under DSS contract. Starting salary of $180,000, with review after 6 months. Authorization to assemble your own team." The silence that followed was deafening. Brian turned white. $180,000? Plus federal benefits, Rossi added. And clearance to work on classified projects involving multiple agencies. I took the envelope, feeling its weight. "When do we start?" "Monday, if you accept." "I accept." That's when Tiffany finally left the conference room. Her face was blotchy, her makeup smeared, but there was something different in her eyes. It wasn't arrogance anymore. It was pure terror. She approached hesitantly, as if I were radioactive. "Lucas," she whispered. I didn't know about your clearance. If I had." "If you had known," I said calmly, "you would have found another way to persecute me. Because the problem was never my clothes, Tiffany. It was my competence." She recoiled as if she had been slapped. "Your HR department," Miller interjected, "violated 16 separate federal protocols. The investigation revealed a pattern of negligence that compromises any future contract with the government." "That means," Brian began. "It means you're finished," I finished. 80% of your revenue came from federal contracts. Without security clearance, you're just another office with fake plants and bad coffee." The elevator pinged. The doors opened to reveal 2 men in suits carrying file boxes. "Immediate audit," Miller explained. "All classified documents must be removed today." I watched as they carried away years of work. My work. Projects I had built, systems I had developed, protocols I had written. "The irony," I muttered, "is that you haven't just lost an employee. You've lost the only one who knew how things worked." Tiffany was crying openly now. "Please," she whispered. "There has to be something." I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in months. No anger, no vindictive satisfaction. Just a cold, crystal-clear understanding. "Tiffany," I said softly, "you turned clothes into war. You turned competence into a threat. And now you've discovered that some wars have real consequences." I turned to the agents. "Shall we?" As we walked toward the parking lot, I heard the sound of glass breaking behind us. Someone had punched a window. I didn't look back. What they had built in pettiness and office politics had collapsed under the weight of their own incompetence. And me? Well, I had a new job to start. One where competence was valued above textile conformity. Sometimes the best revenge is simply letting stupidity reap its own consequences. 6 months later, I was sitting in my new federal office in Arlington, supervising a team of 12 compliance specialists. My salary had doubled, my clearance expanded to top-secret projects, and for the first time in years, I woke up excited to go to work. Brian's company? It went bankrupt in 90 days. Without federal contracts, they lost 80% of their revenue. The fancy building became a co-working space for yoga startups and social media consultants. Tiffany never worked in compliance again. Her permanently invalidated credential made her radioactive to any company that dealt with the government. I heard she was selling nutritional supplements on Instagram. Brian tried to sue the DSS for unfair procedures. The federal judge dismissed the case in 15 minutes, noting that ignorance of security protocols is not a legal defense. Mark, my cowardly former supervisor? He sent me a congratulatory LinkedIn message when my promotion was announced. I ignored it. The sweetest irony? The company that inherited our old contracts came looking for me as a consultant. They needed someone who understood the systems I had built. For $300 an hour, I helped them rebuild everything from scratch. During our first meeting, their CEO asked how a company could make such a catastrophic mistake. Simple, I replied. They confused politics with competence. They thought power meant being right. And they never understood that in federal security, there are no second chances. The lesson I learned? Never underestimate the cost of treating competence as a threat. When you attack someone for being good at their job, you're not just committing an injustice, you're betting your entire career that they don't have the resources to fight back. Tiffany found out I did. And she found out too late. Today, when young analysts ask me how to deal with incompetent bosses, I always give them the same advice. Be so good at what you do that you become indispensable. Because when they try to replace you with office politics, the market will quickly show the difference between those who do the work and those who just pretend to do it. If this story of how competence always beats office politics resonated with you, subscribe to the channel for more stories of people who turned humiliation into victory. Because sometimes, the best revenge is simply being too exceptional to be ignored. In the end, Tiffany didn't fire me. She promoted me. Away from her. And that was the best decision anyone ever made for me. The door closed with a padded finality that made the receptionist sigh. The office was too quiet again. A few necks stretched out of cubicles pretending to look for printer paper. Inside the conference room, voices rose in muffled panic. I couldn't catch every word, but fragments floated through the lobby like debris. Unauthorized personnel, classified asset, contract violation. Then I heard it, crystal clear. So she was fired before the check-in window? A pause. Then chaos. The male voice, probably Agent Miller, fell like a brick. You let her go without notifying DSS. Brian Denning, CEO, came down personally this time. His usually arrogant demeanor replaced by sweaty panic, his tie askew as if he tried to strangle himself in the elevator. He flew past the receptionist, asked the copier lady, crossed the waiting area until he saw me. He stopped dead in front of me, breathing heavily. Lucas, he said, smiling too broadly, too forced. Would you mind coming up to my office for a quick chat? I looked at him, not getting up. I don't work here anymore, I said evenly. Loud enough for the interns gossiping behind the ficus to hear. You'll have to make an appointment. His mouth opened, closed. His Adam's apple bobbed up and down. Please. Try again. Just a quick. I stood up slowly, calm as an earthquake before it strikes. My bag still slung over one shoulder, the black badge still tucked inside like a detonator. I'm sure your team can handle it, I said. It's just fabric, right? Brian's face contorted with the panic of a man realizing that the iceberg was no longer theoretical. I walked past him without waiting for a response. Behind me, the conference room door swung open again. Tiffany emerged, visibly shaking. Her mouth moved toward some defense, some apology, some sigh of HR doublespeak. But I didn't give her the audience. I kept walking. I didn't look back. Not because I didn't want to see their faces, but because I had already seen them. And they looked exactly like justice. I had just reached the glass doors leading out of the lobby when the unmistakable sound of polished shoes on tile stopped me. Not the scurry of interns. Not the desperate shuffling of Brenda in low heels. No, these footsteps had weight. Authority. Purpose. I turned as Agents Miller and Rossi approached from behind. Mr. Givens? Agent Rossi asked, his tone sharp but respectful. I raised an eyebrow, turning halfway toward him. I still am. Unless you want to revoke that too. Agent Miller gave the slightest of smiles. We understand that today's events were unexpected. We'd like a moment of your time. Behind them, the elevator pinged again. The doors parted to reveal a breathless Brian Denning, followed by Tiffany, red-eyed, makeup smeared, the fresh face of corporate revenge. They froze in place like two kids watching the principal hand their report cards to the police. "Sure," I said, straightening the strap of my bag. "Let's talk." The agents flanked me, one on each side, walking me back toward the conference area. Not into the room where the executives had been spiraling minutes earlier. Instead, they stopped near the reception area where everyone could see. The message was clear: she wasn't being taken anywhere. They were talking to me voluntarily. Respectfully. "Mr. Givens," Agent Miller began. "We are reviewing the authorization oversight and response protocol related to your dismissal. Your record with the DSS is clean. Spotless, in fact. Your work handling encrypted data in the first quarter received positive attention." Rossi nodded. "We have questions, of course, but we mainly want your cooperation with the next phase. The contract still exists. The mission hasn't changed. But the contractor may." I took a deep breath. Cold, heavy clarity was beginning to settle into my bones. This was the moment when everything turned. I glanced sideways. Brian Denning was standing near the ficus, sweat soaking his dress shirt like a stress test of regret. Tiffany looked like she might faint. Brian stepped forward, his voice quivering with the urgency of a man watching his career spin down the drain. "Lucas. Mr. Givens. Look, let's be reasonable. Obviously, things have been mishandled on both sides. I'd like to formally offer you your position back." I tilted my head, eyes calm and merciless. "The salary you could afford," I said, "wouldn't cover the therapy it would take to forget working for you." Dead silence. Brian's mouth opened as if to object, but nothing came out. I turned back to the agents. "Where would you like to talk?" Agent Rossi gave a small nod. "We have a field office across town. But no rush. You're not under review. We're simply inviting you to help fix what they broke." I smiled, finally allowing myself the pleasure of it. They hadn't broken one thing. They had broken many. And if you've been following this journey of how corporate incompetence can blow up in the face of those who practice it, don't miss the next chapter. Because what happened next wasn't just the collapse of a few careers, it was the complete implosion of an entire system that confused power with competence. We hadn't taken 3 steps toward the parking lot when Agent Miller's phone vibrated. He stopped in mid-stride, checked the screen, and muttered, "1 minute." His voice didn't change, but I saw the flash of something new in his eyes. Confirmation. The kind that comes at the end of a long sequence of escalating red flags. He turned and walked back into the building, motioning for Agent Rossi to stay with me. "I won't be long," she said. Inside, chaos had settled into that strange corporate silence. The kind that happens after a fire alarm where everyone pretends to work but just stares at Slack waiting for disaster to bloom. Miller didn't knock. He walked straight through the reception area, past the panicked executive assistant, straight to the fishbowl conference room as if he owned the place. Brian Denning was there, hands on his hips, trying to maintain the posture of a man still in control of something. Miller dropped a single manila folder on the glass table. The conversation began low, cut off. Brian's jaw moved faster than his words. Tiffany hovered behind him like a ghost tied to the scene of her own crime. Then Miller opened the folder. From the outside, I watched everything in calm, razor-sharp focus. Brian leaned forward. His face changed. The kind of change that doesn't happen gradually. It snaps. First denial. Then recognition. Then devastation. He sat down heavily, as if someone had pulled the spine out of him. Miller's voice wasn't lower. It carried. Improper handling of a released federal asset, irreversible breaches of the internal security chain. No fewer than 6 failed protocols, all signed by your HR department. Brian stood up again, shaking. "There has to be some correction. A clause, a workaround. This contract is our lifeline." Miller didn't blink. "Your eligibility for the $50 million federal contract is now null and void. The breach has triggered a full DSS audit. Your company is being placed under review with immediate effect." Silence. Then, in addition, Ms. Tiffany Hastings has been flagged as the point of origin for the breach. Her credentials are now invalid. Expect formal communication by the end of the day. It hit like a sniper shot.